Tonight, across America's heartland, farmers are facing a crisis they never saw coming. These are the same farmers who were told tariffs would protect them, save their industry, and give them a fair shot in global markets. But instead of relief, they're watching their future slip away. One number tells the whole story: 94%. That's how much U.S. agricultural exports, especially soybeans, have collapsed since the start of this trade war. For decades, American soybeans were the gold standard, shipped by the millions of tons to buyers like China. Today, those exports have been slashed to almost nothing. This isn't just a bad season, it's a system-wide breakdown. Grain elevators are overflowing, prices are dropping, and cash flow for many farmers has completely stopped. In other words, the entire business model that rural America relied on is cracking under pressure. So how did we get here? How did policies meant to save American agriculture end up putting farmers on the brink of losing their land, their equipment, and in some cases, their hope? To understand that, we need to go back to the start. To soybeans, the crop that once made America an agricultural powerhouse. For years, soybeans were the pride of American agriculture, the so-called flagship export. They weren't just another crop. Honestly, they were the foundation of the rural economy. Nearly 1/3 of all U.S. soybeans went straight to China, feeding its massive livestock industry. But when the U.S. government raised tariffs on Chinese goods, China struck back hard. They slapped tariffs of 25% and 35% on American soybeans, instantly making them just too expensive for Chinese buyers. Imagine your biggest customer suddenly charging you a huge penalty just for selling to them. Overnight, American soybeans became uncompetitive. The result? Silos filled up. Farmers had to store last year's crop while new harvests kept coming in, leaving nowhere to put them. With no buyers, prices crashed. And because most farmers depend on steady cash flow to pay off loans, this wasn't just a paper loss. It became a full-blown financial freeze. You know, soybeans aren't just about farmers. They feed into everything: processing plants, trucking companies, railroads, even the poultry and pork industries that rely on soy-based feed. When soy stopped moving, well, an entire chain of businesses slowed or shut down. And this was only the beginning. If soybeans, the backbone of United States exports, could collapse so fast, what about other crops? Corn, wheat, and dairy were about to face their own reckoning. Soybeans may have been the first to collapse, but they weren't the last. The trade war created a ripple effect that quickly spread across other key crops: corn, wheat, and even the meat and dairy industries. Take corn, for example. Mexico is one of the largest buyers of United States corn, but after Washington imposed new tariffs, Mexico retaliated by slapping tariffs on United States imports. Rather than risk constant price swings or future tariff hikes, Mexican buyers turned to Brazil and Argentina for a more stable supply. Once those trade deals were signed, it wasn't easy for United States farmers to win back that business. The same thing happened to wheat. For decades, American wheat was seen as the best in the world: reliable, competitively priced, and top quality. But when costs ballooned due to tariffs, China shifted to buying from Russia, Australia, and Canada. Even if those sales only made up a small share of the market, losing them could mean losing future contracts permanently. And then there's meat and dairy. These industries took a double hit. They lost access to key markets like China, Europe, and Mexico due to tariffs, while their own costs went up. Soybeans, now scarce and expensive, are a major ingredient in animal feed, which means farmers had to pay more just to raise their livestock. That's a brutal squeeze: lower selling prices at home, higher costs to produce each animal. Dairy producers were hit particularly hard. China imposed tariffs of up to 50% on U.S. milk products, essentially shutting the door on one of the fastest-growing markets. New Zealand, which faced no such barriers, quickly stepped in to take America's place. What started as a fight over soybeans was now a full-blown crisis touching nearly every part of the farm economy. And, that's where the pain started spilling over into rural communities themselves. When exports stop, the damage doesn't stay on the farm. It spreads through entire towns. Cooperatives, which collect crops from farmers and prepare them for export, suddenly lost foreign buyers. With no orders coming in, their cash flow dried up. That meant they couldn't pay farmers on time, which meant farmers couldn't pay their loans. Banks, faced with missed payments, started tightening credit. In some regions, default rates on farm loans are climbing toward 20%. Numbers not seen since the 1980s farm crisis. When loans go bad, farmland and equipment used as collateral get seized, leaving some farmers with nothing but debt. And it doesn't stop there. Trucking companies that move grain, warehouses that store it, restaurants that feed farm workers, all see business drop. Layoffs follow. Local schools and hospitals, funded by property taxes and local spending, feel the pinch as communities lose income. Families are being forced to make impossible choices. Delay sending their kids to college, skip hospital visits, sell off land that's been in the family for generations. Some rural counties are even reporting rising suicide rates, a chilling reminder of how deep this crisis runs. It's a slow-motion unraveling, one that's leaving many towns hollowed out. And yet, despite the pain, many farmers kept hoping Washington would step in with real solutions. What they got instead was something very different: short-term relief checks that felt more like a bandage than a cure. Washington did respond to the farm crisis, but the response has left many farmers frustrated. Aid packages were announced, promising billions in relief to offset the losses caused by tariffs. On paper, it sounded like a lifeline, but in practice, it often felt like too little, too late. Some farmers waited months for their checks to arrive. Others say the payments barely covered a fraction of what they lost. One farmer put it bluntly, "I got $10,000 in aid, but I'm $80,000 in the hole. That's not a bailout. That's a bandage on a bullet wound." The bigger problem is that these programs do nothing to win back lost markets. They're designed to keep farmers afloat for one season, not to rebuild demand for United States crops overseas. There is no clear roadmap for getting soybeans back into China, corn back into Mexico, or dairy back into Asia. Politically, the aid packages were sold as proof that Washington was, taking care of farmers. But many in rural America now see them as stopgaps, tools to buy time, not solutions to fix the root problem. And as each month passes without progress, frustration is building. Farmers who once supported tariffs as a patriotic sacrifice are now asking, how long do we have to wait? For decades, farmers have been one of the most loyal voting blocs in American politics, and honestly, one of the most patient. But that patience is starting to run out. In farm states across the Midwest, frustration has spilled into the open. Farmers have driven tractors into city centers, blocking roads, and holding up signs that read, "Hear us." At local town hall meetings, some are confronting officials face to face, saying, "You were supposed to protect us, but you destroyed our market." What makes this so striking is that many of these communities have historically supported the very politicians who championed the tariffs. Some farmers still say, "Victory is near. We just have to hold on." Others openly admit they feel betrayed. "You cheated us." This split is creating a political storm in rural America. Tariffs were once a rallying cry, but now they are a point of division. People who used to agree on everything from church picnics to county fair contests are suddenly on opposite sides of the argument. One side calling for patience, the other demanding immediate change. And yet, even with protests rising, there is still no guarantee that markets will return, because global buyers may have already moved on. That's where the danger becomes much bigger than a single season's harvest. If this all sounds familiar, it's because America has been here before. In the 1980s, farmers were crushed by a different kind of storm: soaring interest rates and a debt crisis that bankrupted millions of family farms. Entire towns emptied out. Suicide rates rose. It took years and massive federal intervention to stabilize rural America. Today, the trigger is different. Tariffs and trade wars instead of interest rates, but the result is starting to look eerily similar. Loan default rates are climbing toward levels not seen since that era. Land auctions and foreclosures are on the rise. And unlike in the 1980s, there's an even bigger problem. Market share may be gone for good. When China signs long-term contracts with Brazil or Australia, they're not just making a one-time purchase. They're locking in future supply. The same goes for Mexico sourcing corn from Argentina, or Asia turning to New Zealand for milk. Even if the United States ends the tariffs tomorrow, it will take enormous time, money, and political effort to convince these buyers to switch back. And some may never come back at all, fearing that the next trade dispute could cut them off again. This is why economists warn that the damage isn't temporary. Losing a market is like losing trust. Once it's gone, it's hard to win back. For many farmers, this realization is more frightening than low prices or delayed aid checks. It raises the question, if the markets don't return, will small farms survive at all? After years of promises, tariffs were supposed to be short-term pain for long-term gain. But for many farmers, the pain has lasted far too long. And well, the promised gain is nowhere in sight. Well, folks, the numbers speak for themselves. A 94% collapse in soybean exports, shrinking sales of corn, wheat, dairy and meat, rising loan defaults, and rural towns teetering on the brink. Aid packages have kept some farmers afloat for another season, but they haven't solved the core problem: how to win back the markets that were lost. There are, possible solutions. Some experts argue the U.S. must prioritize new trade negotiations with China, Mexico, and other key buyers, not just to lift tariffs, but to rebuild trust. Others call for targeted subsidies or tax breaks on things like fertilizer and farm equipment to lower production costs while markets recover. And many say it's time to invest in finding new buyers, so farmers aren't, as dependent on a single country. What's clear is that time is running out. Each harvest without buyers pushes more farms toward bankruptcy, more towns toward decline, and more families toward leaving the land for good. So now the question isn't just about tariffs, it's about the future of American agriculture. Will this trade war end in revival, or will it perhaps permanently reshape the rural heartland? So what do you think? Should the U.S. stay the course and wait for victory, or change strategy to save farms before it's too late? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to follow this story as it develops.